Hello everybody, my name is Jackie and welcome to Prairie Sports Talk, the podcast where we talk about sports that directly impact the Canadian Prairie. Today is September 20th, 2024, and we have some interesting topics to talk about today. So, we are going to open up the episode talking about last week in the CFL and this upcoming week in the CFL, which will include some interesting quarterback discussions for two different teams that I don't know if anyone expected these teams to be having quarterback discussions at this point in the season when the year began. And then we are going to talk about some MLB news, including a major story that just broke yesterday. And finally, we are going to close out the episode talking about the Swift Current Broncos home and home opener to the season. Let's get into it. Despite last week being a shortened week in the CFL with just 3 games, there were some very, very interesting stories to come out of it. So let's begin with what I think is a game that led to arguably the most interesting quarterback story in recent CFL memory. The Toronto Argonauts taking down the BC Lions 33-17. So let's begin with the Argonauts. They played very solid. I mean, you're not going to take down a team like BC when scoring 30 points without playing solid. Chad Kelly looked decent. 18 for 28 for 268 and a touchdown. Not much you can really complain about there if you're an Argonauts fan. Meanwhile, on the ground, there were some questions, in my opinion, for the Argonauts, because Chad Kelly ended up finishing the game as the leading rusher with 56 yards. Yeah, that's not great. Argos have a very solid ground game, but I mean, sometimes it can be just hard for that to produce every single week. So I guess you can't really fault the Argos for having one rough week with their run game, but I still think it is notable and worthy of being mentioned. As for the receiving game, one thing that really caught me off guard was Mackay Polk, I think I pronounced that name right, ended up being the Argos' leading receiver with 6 receptions for 116 yards and their only receiving touchdown on the game. I can't say I'm overly familiar with this guy. I'm not sure his history in the CFL, anything like that. It can be hard to find info on CFL players when they first have their big breakout game. Hopefully in coming weeks I'll be able to learn more about him. But hey, props to him. That's a major game. Good for him for getting his name out there with a solid game. Now let's talk about what I think is the interesting aspect to this game. The BC Lions. The Lions had 3 different quarterbacks play for them in this game. Nathan Rourke played for them for the first half, going 6 for 12 for 110, no touchdowns, no interceptions. I mean, it's not the Rourke we expected this season, but at the same time, when you get thrown into a starting role in the middle of a season, it can be hard to adapt because there's all these players that have had all year to adjust to their team's playbooks and everything. Meanwhile, Rourke is trying to catch up to speed with everyone else. So at halftime, they put VA in the game. And he played okay. It wasn't the VA that we've seen all season long. He went 4 for 7 for 75 yards and an interception. They also put this Chase Bryce in the game, who went 2 for 4 for 32 yards and a touchdown. I mean, BC's quarterbacking situation is a mess right now. And it's less because they don't have a good quarterback. It's because they have 2 very good quarterbacks. And it can be hard for a team to know which of them to rally behind. Because who has the reins of this team? Is it Rourke? Is it Adams? The fans don't seem to know. The players don't seem to know. I don't think the coaches know. And it's obvious neither of the quarterbacks know. BC needs to pick one of them to be their starter, and they need to stick with it. It can't be a 1A, 1B situation like we've seen some other teams do with moderate success in the CFL in previous years. When you have a quarterback like VA or you have a quarterback like Rourke, you have to give them the reins of the team and they need to make it their own. That is hard to do when there's another quarterback who basically, if it's two horses pulling a wagon, Rourke is controlling one horse, Adams is controlling the other. It is hard to coordinate that. And the ground game, it was very weak as well for this game. Leading rusher Jordan Tyrell, 4 carries for 24 yards. William Stanback, 6 carries for 21 yards. McInnes continues to have a great season, just straight up. Despite the quarterbacking issues in BC, McInnes, he still had 4 receptions for 95 yards in this game. I mean, like, this kid is becoming something special in BC, and as a Rough Rider fan, I'm incredibly jealous and frustrated because we saw flashes of this from him when he was in Saskatchewan. But now that he has the chance to be the go-to man in BC, he is making the most of it. So now let's move on to Hamilton and Ottawa. And I think one question on everyone's mind right now is Hamilton starting to turn a corner? Because they just had another very, very good game. Bo Levi Mitchell, once again, he looked like the Bo Levi Mitchell of old. 20 for 27 for 299, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Solid game from Bo. He played very well. But I hate to rain on Hamilton's parade, but I don't think they're turning a corner yet. Yes, they are hot all of a sudden, but at the end of the day, most teams in the CFL can scrape together a few victories in a row against solid opponents without being a solid team themselves. Yes, Chris Jones, he's come in, he has done a tremendous job with this defense, and he has really turned it around. But I just don't know if this team is a team that can compete at the highest levels in the CFL. Yes, they can get these occasional wins. And yes, a 37-21 win against Ottawa, who is one of the better teams in the league this season, is a tremendous sign. I just don't know if they can compete. Because I don't know if Bo is able to be the go-to man as a quarterback anymore in this league. Their ground game was solid as well in this game. Greg Bell, he was their leading rusher, 15 carries for 99 yards and a touchdown. Very, very solid game. Stephen Dunbar Jr. finally had that breakout we've been waiting for him to have all season long. He had 8 receptions, catching all 8 of his targets for 151 yards and a touchdown. He played really well. Meanwhile, on the other side, Ottawa struggled. Their quarterbacks, and I say quarterbacks plural, because both Brown and Mazzoli played in this game, they played okayish. Mazzoli went 13 for 19 for 183, two touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Brown came in 17 for 27, no touchdowns, 1 interception, and a total of 164 yards. They both played okay. They didn't play the best, but I don't think you can really blame this loss on them. Meanwhile, on the ground, I mean, it was a mixed bag for Ottawa on the ground. Kalen LeBron, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly or not. He played solid. He had 13 carries for 84 yards. And he never really had like a major breakout run. He had some decent length runs, longest being 15 yards, but I mean, like, he never really had a sustained run, if that makes any sense. As for receiving, Dominic Rhymes and Justin Holiday both had a field day this game. Rhymes had 10 receptions for 129 and a touchdown. Hardy had 8 receptions for 103 without a touchdown. Both played very solid. I don't think their offense was to blame. Ottawa's defense looked like Swiss cheese out there. Hamilton was tearing through it all game long, finding the gaps in coverage, and it was kind of painful to watch if you were cheering for Ottawa. At the end of the day, I think Hamilton is better than I may have given them credit for in the last couple months, but I still don't think they're as good as they're looking right now. I think they're just on a bit of a hot streak. Give them 3-4 weeks and they'll likely be back to the team we have seen them be most of the season to this point. And then we finish up the week with the second tie of the season. Montreal and Calgary tie 19-19. I don't know if I could tell you the last time that two games in the same CFL season resulted in ties without there being one overlapping team. Earlier in the season, Ottawa and Saskatchewan tied, and now Montreal and Calgary have tied. I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about with this game. It was two teams looking very average playing each other. Montreal's a lot better than they looked in this game. Calgary looked okay, I guess. I mean, there was nothing really that stood out from either team. Cody Fajardo had a very average game, going 19 for 26 for 204. Fletcher played solid in terms of rushing, gained 7 rushes for 90 yards. Probably one of the better players on the two teams, in my opinion. Receiving, Julian Grant had 8 receptions for 71 yards. Solid game there. Meanwhile, for Calgary, Jake Mail went 29 for 37 for 236 and a touchdown. Again, like Fajardo, he was very average in this game. Dietrich Mills, probably the only player that played better than Fletcher. He had 21 carries for 122 yards. A very solid game. He has quietly had a very, very good second half of the season so far. Malkin Michel was Calgary's best receiver. 6 receptions for 73 yards and a touchdown. I don't know, there's not a whole lot to say about this game. Two teams on opposite ends of the spectrum. Montreal being one of the top teams in the league. Calgary being one of the bottom teams. They both played very average against each other. And it ended up being a tie. I don't think there's much more to this game than that. Now we move on to week 16 in the CFL. I think this week is going to be very, very telling for how the rest of the season plays out. Because a lot of these matchups are between teams that have been playing very, very similarly to each other over the last couple weeks. So we open up the week with a doubleheader. The first game between Hamilton and Toronto in Toronto. I think this is the week Hamilton starts to cool off after a bit of a hot stretch. I think Hamilton is going to look okay in this game. I feel like Bo Levi is probably going to pass for right around 250. But on the other side, I think the Argos are going to look very sharp in this game. I feel like they put up at least 30 points in this game. I feel like Chad Kelly passes for right around 300, probably more. And I feel like the Argos may struggle in the first half, but in the second half, they just really run away with this game. Then we move on to the second half of the doubleheader. Two teams that have been struggling a lot these last couple weeks. Saskatchewan and Calgary. Oh boy, this game could be a mess. So, Saskatchewan has a very notable roster change this week as opposed to when they had their bye last week. Olmsted will be their starting running back. They have gone out and signed Olmsted after the Ottawa Red Blacks cut him a few weeks ago. I think this is a decent pickup for the Riders. I feel like if Ouellette is going to be out much longer, the Riders need a running back who can adjust and will have more than just one good half of football. Because Hickson, he'll play solid in the first half. But if the team makes any adjustments to him, he struggles in the second half. We've seen that a few times this season, but I feel like with Olmsted, he's had a solid season with Ottawa. Supposedly, behind the scenes, there were some issues which led to his release. But I feel like that may only further his drive to want to have a solid end to the season. There are definitely worries that Saskatchewan is a potentially slowly self-destructing team, especially after practice was called early the other day. And adding Olmsted to that could only make things worse. But I also think adding Olmsted to the team will at least provide them with some help for Harris in the backfield, because when he drops back, I feel like he does not have much of a chance, because everyone knows if Ouellette's not in the backfield, he's likely passing the ball. So with Hickson playing almost every down, the other team blitzes almost every play. But now with Olmsted on the team, I feel like that will at least give the Riders some form of a rushing game. But again, this is a big risk for the Riders, and a small part of me is scared this could just devolve into another situation like Duron Calder, where the player is really good, but his ego just gets in the way. I hope that's not the case for Olmsted. Meanwhile, for Calgary, they've had a very, very rough season. They've tried a few different quarterbacks in the last couple of weeks. I mean, nothing's really made a change. And now they're coming off a tie in a game they probably should have won, in my opinion. I feel like Calgary is going to be either incredibly hungry to get a win on home soil this week, or they're going to be incredibly demoralized and not look that good. I feel like the Riders take this game, but I feel like it's going to be very, very close. I feel like this could be a 2 or 3 point difference. This could come down to a late game field goal, and hopefully not a late game rouge. Now we move on to my game of the week, the Montreal Alouettes and the Ottawa Red Blacks. So, this is an interesting matchup in my opinion, because these are the two top teams in the East going head to head, and I feel like this is a look ahead to the Eastern Final. I feel like Montreal is going to be fighting their hearts out all game long, but the Ottawa faithful will be pushing the Red Blacks just over the edge, and the Red Blacks will fight just ever so slightly more than the Alouettes, and they will just barely squeak out a win in a very, very tight game here. I think if you only watch one game this week, this is the game you gotta watch. It's gonna be a very, very interesting game, and I'm excited for it. Then we close out the week with, if you had given me this game 6 or 7 weeks ago, I would have said I don't want to watch this game. But now Winnipeg and Edmonton, they are two teams that are surging right now. Two of the hottest teams in the league. I think this game is a very good way to end the week. Winnipeg is visiting Edmonton, as I alluded to, and I feel like Edmonton takes this. This will be Trey Ford's first game back from injury. I feel like he's just going to ball out. He's going to have a very, very good game. On the other side, I feel like Zach Collaros is also going to play solid, and he could have a game that should be considered amazing, but Trey Ford is going to have a game that just completely overshadows whatever Zach does in this game. This is going to be a back and forth game, but I feel like Edmonton takes it, but it's going to be a very fun game, and I think this will be a very, very high scoring game, and frankly, I'm excited for it. Now, on to the MLB. So, let's start with the bad news. Bo Bichette's season is over. In what is probably the best example of how the Jays' year has gone, Just days after coming off the 10-day IL, Bo Bichette has broken his finger and has been placed back on the 10-day IL, and this will almost definitely end his season. Yeah, it's been that kind of year for the Jays. It hasn't been great. You gotta feel for Bo. You really do. He's one of the hardest workers in the league. He is beloved by the Blue Jays fan base for a reason. He's a great player and seems like a genuinely great guy. I hope Bo has a swift recovery this offseason, and I hope to see him back in a Blue Jays jersey next season. Hopefully next year goes a lot better for the Jays. But now on to some good news. Because for the first time in MLB history, a player has hit 50 home runs in the same season. They have gotten 50 steals. Shohei Ohtani has recorded the first ever 50-50 season. That is absurd. That has never been done ever in one of the oldest professional sports leagues in North America. He is the first player to do it. That's insane. He did it yesterday against the Miami Marlins in a game where he went 5 for 5, which included 2 home runs and 2 stolen bases. He was out of his mind all game long, just like he has been out of his mind all season long. And here's the crazy thing. He's rehabbing Tommy John still. This is a rehab season for him. What's it going to be like next season when he's fully healthy? That's a terrifying thought. The regular season for the Swift Current Broncos hasn't even started yet, but they are already making headlines. Yesterday, they made a major trade with the Calgary Hitmen, where they traded 2004 forward Connor Vidston in exchange for a 2005 forward Connor Dale, 2025 second round draft pick, 2025 fourth round draft pick, and 2026 second round draft pick. I understand why the Broncos did this. That doesn't mean I have to like the fact that the Broncos did this. The Broncos already have well over the allowed amount of 20-year-olds, and Viddy is 20 this season. We were going to have to trade 20-year-olds regardless. We already started doing that with Matt Wood a few weeks back. And like the Matt Wood trade, this one really hurts. Vidston is a very beloved player in Swift Current. And he seemed to love this community as much as it loved him. He still is a very, very hard-working player, and he is incredibly tough. Calgary has just picked up a very, very underrated player, in my opinion. And I just hope when he comes to Swift Current, he doesn't make the Broncos pay too badly. But now that we've talked about that trade, let's talk about the home-and-home series between the Swift Current Broncos and the Saskatoon Blades to open up the season. So, tonight at 7 p.m. at the Innovation Plex in Swift Current, the puck drops on the Broncos season. This is going to be a fun year. The Broncos are back in the East Division after being in the Central Division for a couple of seasons. And now they are coming off a Central Division title. They will be raising the banner for that title likely tonight. And I think it's going to be a very fun game. Obviously, the ceremony is going to be fun. Banner raising ceremonies are always fun. But this game should be very, very tight. These are two teams that, yes, they are losing significant portions of their team last season. But at the same time, I don't think either team has lost so much that they won't be able to compete this season. I think these are going to be two teams right in the thick of things as we go down the stretch towards playoffs, and I feel like there's a very real chance that both these teams could end up in a playoff slot. With that said, I think they split the games. I think both teams win their game at home, and both teams will start 1-1 for the season. And frankly, if you're watching your team in their home opener, you can't really fault them if they win. So, yeah. But regardless, I'm very excited for the Broncos season. Let's just get it going. But that is everything I have for you guys this week. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on Spotify, be sure to follow the 13th Man Podcast Network. I hope you guys have a great day. I hope you guys have a great night. I hope you guys have a great whatever. Stay safe, stay strong. You got this. And this is Jackie for Prairie Sports Talk signing off.